Welcome to Seekers and Shifters, where we talk to the world's foremost experts in personal growth and development and ask them everything we really want to know. Hey there, Seekers and Shifters. It's Michelle, and in this week's episode, I talk with Sam Kukathas. And Sam runs Soul Purpose Leaders, and he is an amazing high-level coach for amazing high-level people. So he works with really big deal world changers who are doing things that impact millions of people. And I'm just such a big fan of his work. We really got to dive into what it takes to perform at that level, as well as just some of our thoughts on politics. So this episode does get a little bit political. It gets a little bit interesting on that score, and how world leaders can affect change, and how we as coaches and leaders can help people who are working at that level to come from a place of alignment and light and purpose. And so I thought this was a fascinating episode. I hope you think so too. Please give it a watch, a listen, and let us know what you think. Of course, we always want to hear from you, so please go ahead and leave us a comment or a question. And if you haven't done so, please please subscribe. Please tell all your friends about Seekers and Shifters so we can keep this going and enjoy my awesome conversation with Sam. Sam, please introduce yourself to our friends.
Michelle, thanks so much for having me on the show. Hi, so I'm Sam Kukathas. I run a company called Soul Purpose Leaders, which basically allows people to clear what is going on at a somatic level so they can create whatever they want in life.
And we love a somatic coach, and we love clearing for whatever we want in life. What I love about you, and we don't know each other very well yet, but what I've gathered from your work is that you're working with really big deal people on really big deal shit. And I want to get into that, because a lot of times when we're talking about coaching, we're talking about people getting, fairly attainable outcomes. They're clearing common challenges. They're clearing fear of being seen so they can do marketing so they can make $1 million a year in their business. Things like that. Not that that's anything to sniff at, guys. That's a big deal. And you're talking about helping people impact millions of people. Yeah. Talk to me about that level, and how do we get from this level to that level?
Well, I think it's all about the environment that you're in. So, for instance, over the last, 5 or 6 months, I've had the opportunity to travel to some really incredible places. So right now, for instance, I'm in Orange County, a luxury mansion, which was owned by friends of mine who I met in Antarctica. And in Antarctica, I got to meet a whole network of leaders who've done much bigger things, to be fair, in business life than I. I think the biggest person probably had a $600 million company and had an exit from that. They'll tell us, I think I should know someone there had a $1 billion company and left that, and now they mentor only for the impact that it can get to make in the world, not for money. Because it's what do you pay someone who's at $1 billion company? So that's the kind of caliber of people that were there. Actually, that guy was actually in one of the sessions that I did in Antarctica. So you get to be exposed to people that you wouldn't get exposed to just by being on Facebook, for instance.
What I love about this is about getting in the room, and this dovetails into entrepreneurship a lot of times on the show, because it has to, because that's what I do. It just kind of ends up going there naturally. But one of the things that really clicked for me a few years back was you just have to do well enough to get in the room. And this concept of, I want to be the stupidest person in the room. I want to be around people that go, oh my God, who are you, and how do you do this? When I first got into EO, I had this experience. So I don't know if you're familiar with entrepreneurs.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. You have to have $1 million a year company to get in. 5-6 years ago, when I first had $1 million a year in my company, that was a big goal for me, and I was very excited. I was like, oh my God, I can finally get in this club of other people that have $1 million a year business. And then of course I get in there and there's people that have $10 million, $100 million a year business. And I was just like, oh God, that was my price of just entry into the room, just to be the smallest fish in the room. And how fucking cool to be the smallest fish in the room. How did you start getting in these big fish room?
Yeah, just invitation is really I was doing an interview with a mentor, and I thought the interview had already started, and whatever I'd shared had him see something and think about a possibility. And he was like, oh, if there was an opportunity to go to Antarctica in March to be with 130 leaders who are out to change the vibration of the planet, would you want to go? And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, well, I don't know if there's space, but I'll reach out to my friend and, we'll hit it up. And so then the next morning I woke up and there was an invitation to go to Antarctica, and the price was, okay, yep, I can make that work. So that was that. And then suddenly a dream which had never been my dream became a dream, which was being fulfilled. And then got to meet these incredible people who become like a soul family. A lot of them, the ones who I'm staying with here. And that really kickstarted things in a massive way.
We learned the coolest things on this show. I didn't know that there were even buildings in Antarctica that weren't like scientific laboratory type things where people could gather. Were you on a
that
ship?
I don't I don't know. Like there's definitely the ships, but I don't think I saw anything which wasn't like scientifically, that basis. But we're only going to like the little tiniest part of Antarctica. I think like Antarctica's on like 12,000 miles or something. Don't quote me on that, but it's a massive, massive continent. And so you're going to like just the smallest tip of Antarctica, which is incredible, but nowhere near as cold as you might expect.
Amazing. People are listening to this going, I knew the Illuminati were meeting somewhere. We didn't know. maybe Antarctica. Yeah. What's really cool to me about this path is the way that something can seem impossibly far away from where you are. And then all kind of like you're describing, like this one conversation happens, this one opportunity opens up, and it just skyrockets you from this level to that level. So you're sitting in a room where you go, oh my God, 3 months ago, I never would have even imagined being in this room. And all of a sudden here I am. And that's where it gets woo for me, Sam, because I start thinking, okay, the universe is starting to illuminate a path for me. And I've been looking at my own work as how do I get out of my own way so that when these opportunities present themselves, I am there and I am ready to receive the invitation, right? Because sometimes I get busy. I get networking requests for like, oh, can we catch up for 30 minutes? And I'm like, I'm busy. And it's like, wait a second. That 30-minute phone call could be the one.
Yeah.
With a new friend that changes the trajectory of your life, right? How do you think about that?
It's funny you say that. I was listening to Daniel Priestley talk about this. Like my coach was like, oh, Sam Kukathas, you might be interested in this. And it was basically like a 5-minute segment where Daniel Priestley is talking about like the idea of strategy sessions and not knowing what the time you should give to a certain person based on whether or not they're a person who's about to scale and they really can support, whether they're just looking for a chat. And so he's like created based on the questions that they answer, it takes them to 3 different options. So it's like Calendly, but on steroids in terms of the filtering system to create like that experience of one, it looks really nice, but also it's like, oh, okay, now I know how to divide my time and how to prepare and come into this space and what energy I'm bringing to it.
You know, I've intersected with a lot of that as well. And I was also kind of trained in a different way, which is, and my coach called it love them all and let God sort them out, which I love that phrasing. My joke way of thinking of it is the first one's free, right? But it's like if somebody wants to talk to me and I can find the time to talk to them, obviously without taking away from my children or, paying clients.
Yeah.
I want to give, I don't want to prejudge somebody and say, oh, that person doesn't have enough money to become a client, for instance, or this or that, because you never know what's going to become of this conversation. And there's lots of ways to win. You can win by getting a client. You can also win by making a friend. You can win by getting a new idea, something that sparks inspiration in you. You can win by learning more about a common problem in your client. Or there's so many ways to win. And so as I started to scale, I tried to create a system where even if I didn't have the bandwidth to talk to everybody, somebody on my team had the bandwidth to talk to everybody. Everyone who wants to talk to us can get some type of attention from somebody. And interesting conversations will be had, and everybody gets that hour. Like I don't know. What do you think of that concept?
Yeah, I think if you've got the space, the capacity, the team to do that, I think that works really well. My own approach has been one. My company has just been me. It's a relatively new company in the fact that it emerged in a breathwork session in August last year. It kind of shifted from being called the philosophical coach to being sole purpose leaders. And the moment I stepped into that was when everything kind of moved in an upwards trajectory, much, much faster than I anticipated. So while it's just been me, I'm more selective of who I give my time to. And to give you an example of this, I was in Cuba in the end of May for a retreat. I had like 30 people take up an offer to do these free, at the time I called them like neuroenergetic taster sessions. And basically like 30 people booked them in 7 days, which is a nice problem to have, but there wasn't any kind of filter on who. So people who were just looking to get a breakthrough or transform, but not actually looking to invest in themselves were also people who were, again, they were all people who would say like, oh, we're going to write a testimonial and things like that. But then they don't have the level of integrity to do that at this stage. So you just actually felt, in my case, what I experienced was a burnout. And so when I got to Cuba, I had to ground, I had to get to be at a space of receivership as opposed to just always being the person to help others and just get back to myself because I was actually getting ill from I was doing 12-hour days. And the work I do is with sound frequencies. So it's with my voice. And, you're literally using your entire body to be able to channel energy, to be able to create these shifts in minutes for people. And so if you're doing that constantly, and on the receiving end, you're not actually feeling like receiving on anything, it's going to impact you. It doesn't matter how, powerful, whatever, as a healer or what you are, it's still going to impact you because you're not experiencing the give-receive aspect, which is needed in any kind of exchange, whether it's friendship or not. If it feels like it's one-dimensional, then it could feel great for the moment, but then when it doesn't actually have that holistic, aspect of give-receive as being experienced on both sides, then something is missing. And what I was finding more and more with that one was like that was happening. So we had to put a filter on who this is for. And by that time, like, a little bit of the horse had bolted. So I already had to commit it to doing that. Like I literally was like, oh my God, I've given these till May 30th. I have to keep doing this because that's my word, right? Like I'm the kind of person where the integrity is extremely high. And so if I said I'm going to do that, obviously I know you can honor your word, to keep your word and all these sorts of things. But it was like, all right, that's what I've said. I'm going to stick by it. But there was a cost to doing so. So that's why I have probably a slightly different approach when it comes to how I approach these conversations. At the same time, I'm also somewhat strategic in that if I'm with someone who is doing something absolutely extraordinary in the world, I'm probably just going to offer them an experience of what I do, because that has so many different possibilities beyond whether or not someone becomes a client. It's like you could create a partnership which could end up being a company which is worth $1 billion. You could create something where they know people who could then connect you with this person and that person, So I'm a both hand kind of approach where I love to give my time. Like there's nothing I love more than working with game changers who've got absolutely massive visions for humanity and being able to support them. And if I've got someone and I can see where they're at, I've also got to be wary of like, okay, where does this fit within what I'm committed to? And what I've got better at is looking at, okay, well, what is it that I'm committed to right now in terms of the kinds of people that I work with? Well, the cap has to be, they've got to be a visionary leader. They've got to be someone who has a vision and they want to see what they can stretch themselves into, in a way where they're going to expand in this exponential way. If they're not that kind of person, I'm not the right person for them right now. They might go to a coach or someone else. There's so many different mentors in the world. And I'm okay with not being the person right now for every single person. There's other things I'm designing which will be able to kind of cover the gamut of the human condition and as much of the world as possible. But there's also the reality of what's right now.
Oh, 100%. And I think I look at that as somebody asked me the other day, like who my ideal client is, and what popped out of my head was somebody that's sick of their own shit. There's got to be that willingness to shift. We can get into the nerdy levels of, unconscious willingness to shift and, what's going on with trauma and why that may or may not be present. I want anyone listening to realize there's no judgment behind this, right? About being willing to shift or not. Because sometimes that's in our world, that's marketed as well. If you're not ready to do the work.
Oh gosh.
You know what? Unconsciously, you may not be healed to the point, or your unconscious may not be ready to take you there because it doesn't feel safe. That's okay. We're not judging that. Like it comes in the right time. And I can hear pretty quick, are we ready to shift or not? I can start to ask the questions, are we ready to shift or not? If you're not ready to shift and there's maybe deeper trauma work to be done, I can refer you pretty quickly to folks who can help if that's what you want. Sometimes this is a 5-minute conversation around, hey, here's what I'm hearing. Here's what I'm qualified to do. Here's what I'm not qualified to do. Maybe talk to this person or that person or do this. My advice is worth what it costs in this situation. Here's what I'm giving you. If there's something there where there's a resonance and I can tell there's something that I can do even energetically and somebody's open to that in that moment, yes. Am I going to give for free right then in that moment to help somebody shift? Sure. If they're going to become a client, they're going to become a client. I've really gotten very woo, Sam, in terms of like what's meant to be will be and what's not meant to be will not be. And there's like less that I can do about that than I wish were true. So I'm trying to be more open to receiving what's for me and less like, how do I make this happen or control this person? You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. You can have a commitment to creating a certain kind of, outcome in the world, but who it comes through or how it comes through, you don't have control of that. So I think, it's always looking at like, what is the controllables? What can I actually be responsible for? Well, I can be responsible for how I show up in any kind of exchange, the energetic exchange is going to be, so that if there is a possibility to be created, then it's aligned, like the energy is aligned to be able to fulfill that. If I'm coming in like, I'm pretty tired. Yeah, it's been a hard day. Didn't sleep much or any of that kind of stuff. Like, you're not creating possibility from that space, right? It's the way you show up, in any exchange is going to be the determinant of, is this going to be the moment where the universe wants to provide you something? Or if you're not on the resonant frequency, you're going to get whatever at that resonant frequency.
Yeah. And I mean, you can, at that level as a coach or leader, you can actually start to create some harm if you kind of show up as not your best self and you're just not in the mood for it today. And somebody's bringing you their vulnerability and you're not open to what needs to come through you in order to help them because you're in your own shit, right? They're not going to get anything out of it and you're not going to get anything out of it. It's probably a waste of everybody's time. To your point, I would say reschedule that call and take a nap.
Yeah. I think for me, that's a very rare thing. Like, one thing I've been very good at over time is just being able to distinguish anything that's going on internally with myself from being able to be the space for clients. And one of the things I use to support my own work is I use a microfrequency device, which can run different kinds of programs around harmonization of essentially of the cells, right from information, the idea of an information field. It's kind of the idea, as I understand, is like, imagine that there is an IP address which exists for your cellular structure. And that if you could tap into that, you could see where your kind of body is at and your mind is at any moment in time. And then you could run programs to create harmonization wherever there was a lack of harmony, including looking at things like your aura. And so basically being able to create a flow through your central channels. So from like the root chakra all the way up, you can like, okay, this is where this is at. Okay, the throat is low. I'm going to run this program to be able to allow that to come up. And then that allows, especially with sound, because the resonance will change depending on what's going on within the body, you can create more of that flow to come through. So that's for me like one of the secret weapons, to be able to bring myself to whatever is needed independently of what's going on in my life.
Absolutely. And one of the things I love about this, there's so many different tools to do this. We have, and it may be the same program you're talking about. We have a program we use at home that scans us every day and kind of gives us healing frequencies. As a coach, I use emotional clearing, which is a somatic modality. We use energetic clearing. Obviously, I'm an NLP nerd. There's a lot of things we can do mentally and just in terms of like visualizations to clear. But the point is the same, which is, as leaders, before we go out into the world and before we impact anybody else, we do what we need to do to clear ourselves and get ourselves right for the day, right? And everybody that I
Absolutely
that's functioning at any type of high level has a practice that sometimes spans hours, minutes to hours every morning, where they get themselves right before they go out, right?
Yeah, I'm probably unusual in that I'm not as wedded to a practice, which is like, this is the practice every single day. I'm much more of an inflow person. And so sometimes I'll go out onto the grass and I will lie down and I'll listen to this sound frequency track, which I'm moved by at the moment. Other times I'll be like, all right, I'm going to do a breathwork session. Other times I'm doing like a really short breathwork session from another kind of facilitator. And it's just like what feels right for that day. And so, yeah, I'm not like your typical morning routine, like, okay, I blocked out 4 hours for the beginning of the day before I start my work with clients. I'm like, no, I'm dynamic in the way I be as a human being. So I really just feel into that. That means sometimes I don't do any kind of like grounding practice. I can just, be really straight with you. And I just be on a call and I just bring myself to being the person that's needed to be able to make the impact that's needed.
I tend to be a little more like you in terms of just like, what do I need to do today? There's some things that I try to do most days. Like I try to go on a walk, in the sunshine pretty early in the day. Most days, some days I don't make it. Some days I do. But in terms of clearing, it's like, yeah, what's going on with me today? If I wake up and I feel a little edgy, feel some kind of way, as the kids say, then I'm probably going to do a little more work until I feel clear. Some days I wake up and I'm feeling fantastic, and it's like, cool, we kind of roll into what's going on today.
I think one of the things I attribute this ability to be able to shift the internal state to just being with people is that I worked in a confidential role with someone who'd impacted tens of millions of lives. And every day that I came into work, you had to disappear self, because your role was like, this is the role. This is Sam. Sam, once you open the door, Sam disappears and I'm in this role because I'm being for them. I'm being for this team. I'm being for what's being the commitment that we have to impact millions of lives. That was the context which was created to be able to get yourself out of the way time and time again. And of course, things will show up because the nature of this environment was a very, very elite performance environment, almost like the Navy SEALs of high performance without being in the Navy SEALs. And you were like the dynamic of it, like you're constantly on your feet for 12 hours a day. And there'll be moments where you're like, the F am I doing here? Like, why is this? This is not what I expected I'd be doing with my time. Like, did I spend all that money on education to be doing this kind of work? Like, all sorts of egoic things will be coming up, and you've got to bring yourself back. Okay, this isn't about you. Back to this. Experience what's there. What's going on internally with you. Cool. Got that. Come back. And what's the next action to take? So I feel like that training has really helped to be able to kind of go like, I can park that, right? And then I'm going to be with this. Right? Like for instance, the last week or so, there's been some stuff happening in my own personal life, which was pretty emotionally challenging, not being able to support the person I love with what she's dealing with from afar. And at the same time, I'm in a space where I've got massive opportunity in front of me. I'm facilitating for a group of, 20 leaders at this retreat. And I've got a responsibility, not from a space of burden, just because of my commitment to what I'm out here to do, to bring the best self to that. So I'm going to do whatever it takes to honor that space that I'm in personally, create the space to emotionally feel into that, but also step into who am I here to be?
100%. What's interesting about that is I think there's a healthy way to do that and a very unhealthy way to do that. We connected briefly on politics. I come out of politics. I work with political consultants a lot in my day job. And in politics, there is generally a very unhealthy dynamic for the folks who work behind the scenes in terms of, especially in campaign mode, which we're in right now, right? None of this is about me. None of this matters. And it goes to the point where it's like my eating doesn't matter. My sleeping doesn't matter. My family doesn't matter. What matters is that we win this campaign, and people get shamed into that in terms of like, don't you care about the movement? This is bigger than you. This is more important than you. Right now, the rhetoric is like democracy is at stake. I'm sure there's like rhetoric on both sides about the world's going to end if this person doesn't get elected or that person. And you get kind of shamed into putting all of your own needs aside. And by the time I get to people who've been working in the field for 10 years, 20 years, they don't know how to take care of themselves at all. They're completely dissociated from their wants, needs, feelings. They have really dire health outcomes going on. They've had dire, I've been divorced twice myself, you know what I mean? Like,
Sure.
It's not good. And so where do you start to draw the line between, okay, there's a healthy way to put myself aside and hold space in my job, which all high performers have to do at some level. And there's a really unhealthy dissociative way to do this that's actually kind of compounding my trauma.
Yeah, like I wouldn't recommend the environment that I was in for a long period of time. Like I was in there for 9 months. I had friends who were there for 7 years, and I saw that there was a diminishing returns, to be honest, in that environment. Like, yeah, you can have a force of nature and being able to kind of shift yourself from your internal state to just being for others and everything like that. But there was also something which was missing about that, which is you're not actually having the time to deal with what's going on somatically. And that is just a massive missing, which I've kind of like over the last couple of years of shifting from working with energy with your hands to using the breath to using sound. It's like that is non-negotiable for me, that I'm experiencing what I'm feeling within my body, because the intelligence of the body is extraordinary. If you allow the body to come into harmony, you will step into an entirely different version of yourself. And like people have no idea, truly, like that's what people call it. The body keeps the score. It's like, yeah, you use that almost like a slogan. You every single word has a resonance. If you use the word hard for someone, their belief about something being hard, they'll start to feel something as a tension, most likely within the body. And so that's something which is being held onto almost like an imprint. And if you can clear that, then you start to clear all these other beliefs about things being hard. Like I remember like a person I was working with who had beliefs about things being hard in business. So we go to the source of where did that come from? Okay, 5 years old, maybe washing up and didn't want to wash up. It was such a hard life or whatever it was, right? And then we cleared that. We then cleared it in what it looks like in business. But then they come back the next week and say, Sam, you're not going to guess what happened. I just had the best sex of my life with my partner because I disappeared that belief about things being hard, including relationships. So that's the way it works. You shift what's going on at a somatic level, all these other things start to clear, and then you step into a new way of seeing yourself and experiencing yourself, and the beliefs which previously were there become absurd.
I know. And gosh, that's what I love about this work, is that moment where somebody realizes it only took me a few minutes to shift how I experience everything in my entire life. And if that's possible today, that's possible every single day. And that's where people start to realize they can start to create their own reality. And that's when the magic begins to happen. It's really cool. To your point, right? There's a difference between dissociating like permanently, like stuffing it down in a little box, holding it down in your butt, and saying, I am now in control of when I can associate and dissociate from my feelings, which all people have to do, right? Like I'm a mom. If my whole house is sick, let's say, we all got a stomach virus in the same week, right? This happens in family. I have to dissociate from my own need to be sick, to take care of my kid, make sure they're okay. And then I get to go be sick because that's what being a mom is like, right? As long as I'm conscious of, hey, I'm going to take care of you for an hour and then I'm going to go take care of myself. It's okay. Where it becomes not okay is if I never take care of myself.
Absolutely. I think that's such a great example. Like that's what it is to be a leader, right? And that's a huge role of leadership, is being a mum and being able to like, okay, obviously we talk about like putting our oxygen mask on first, and there's obviously got to be some balance as well as a parent. And I work with enough parents where it's like they're not doing that. So there might be still something there is like, right, like how can you do that? But in that example, it's like, yeah, like if the kids aren't able to function, it's not going to work. So you got to find that equilibrium between, your own self-care and this, keeping them alive.
Well, and as a leader, that just becomes more and more exponential, right? And so the less you dealt with yourself, the more that's going to spill out. I think this is what people don't get about it, is they think they can stuff it forever. And you can stuff it for like a while. Some of these guys that I've worked with that have been in the military and things like that, like you can stuff things for 20, 30 years. At some point, it's coming up. And the harder we stuff, like the more the more explosively it comes up and the more randomly it comes up, right? And that's when you're in a position of leadership and that happens, then you can actually really kind of hurt people.
Definitely. Yeah. Because you're not emotionally regulated to be able to have the kinds of conversations, to lead from the front, because, you're essentially dealing most likely from a more reactive state of being rather than being in a created state where you're then creating conversations which can make more and more impact, where you're creating the people you work for in a way where they feel more empowered and more seen and more heard, more acknowledged, all the kinds of things that every single human being needs to experience. So yeah, it's fundamental.
Well, and I would even go so far as to say, at least my current theory of this, and I'm curious as to your take, is that like the number one bottleneck to becoming a leader at a bigger and bigger level is your ability to regulate your own emotion.
Yeah, I think that's right. Like if I think about the process that I've developed, what I'm looking at is not just what they're feeling within the body, but what's the emotion which corresponds with that feeling. So then, they say, okay, there's a sadness there or there's an anger there. Then we're having that emotion be experienced. We use sound as a way to have that journey be honored. So it's acknowledging literally what that emotion is, right? The way I think about what's going on within the body, including the emotion, is it wants exactly what we want. It wants to be seen, heard, and acknowledged. And when you don't do that, there is a big cost to play. And you might not even know what the cost is because you're not able to experience what life is like without that cost, but there is a big cost to play.
And I relate that to parenting. A lot of the people that I work with are parents. I don't know about you, but this is one that everyone can get. Because if you have a little toddler who wants something and is having an emotion and is expressing that emotion, and you say, not now, we'll deal with you later, the reaction you're going to get is, no!
Sure.
And most parents learn pretty quick, that I'm going to kneel down onto their level. I'm going to look them in the eye and I'm going to say, like, I hear that you're frustrated right now. And I know you really want that candy bar, and we can get a candy bar tomorrow. And then they're going to calm down. And it's kind of like that, right? Our emotions are coming up like toddlers sometimes, and often because that they are coming up from baggage that was created when we were toddlers. And so they present as like inner toddlers.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's 100%, right? Like we look at the political scene as we know it, right? It's the quality of the leadership is a consequence of the level of inner work that they've done on the emotions that they have. And then it's the kinds of vibration you get to see in what politics looks like across the world is a consequence of where are they coming from, is a vibration which is much more like fear and scarcity based. Even when they've made money themselves, the way they're like, oh, if I spend money on this, what the public think about that? Like certainly in the UK, where you have like Westminster falling down potentially, like there are gargoyles which could fall and have fallen before, which could kill someone. They're like, well, we don't want to spend public money because what's the perception going to be if we do that? So let's have another committee debate about what we should do. And so like you might create agreement and then like, someone's like, no, we can't do that because the public will get upset. And so it just goes round and round in circles without anything actually being done about what is actually really necessary. And then they waste billions of dollars on things which are really not good and make, terrible, terrible choices because what's driving there is the ego.
Oh, 100%. What's funny is in the US, I would agree with you. Most politicians are like, oh, my personal finances are going to be scrutinized when people run for office. A lot of that becomes public record, especially president. Like, what are your investments in? And, I got to make sure that everything's above board. Except Donald Trump is like, yeah, I spent money on gold toilets and didn't pay my contractors. What are you going to do? People fucking love it. So, that's side note. I'm curious. I'm going to get myself in trouble and I'm going to say it anyway. There are some who feel that anyone who would run for a high political office must be a narcissist. It must come from some kind of not mentally well placed, because if someone were sane and well regulated, they would never want to be in that position. What do you think of that? I know you're going to be doing some work with some global leaders here, so tell us.
Sure. So I'm pretty distinct from most people in that I'm very anti-labels. So I don't think of people as narcissists. I know that people have an agreement about what someone is to call them a narcissist. I just see them as there's something which has happened within the timeline. And then as a consequence of that, that's created the version of this person as they are, right? Like even with Donald Trump, like if I look at someone like him, like I'm not a fan of Trump, but what does this person want? He wants to be loved. So he's going to do anything which is consistent with experiencing more love. That includes pushing his weather vane any which way, which is consistent with that. Now, he's also got a lot of hate to deal with, which is, I'm not sure, who knows what his internal life looks like. But that's really what I see is the direction of travel for him is about that. So if you could actually work with someone like him, I think he'd be one of the easiest ones to work with because it's so clear what he really wants. He wants to leave a legacy. He wants to have the country really thrive, and he wants to be loved. So with him, you're just like, okay, where was the first point you didn't experience being loved? Right? Go to that. All right, let's experience that. What was that like for you? Okay, let's feel that, what that's like in the body. Okay, great. Now we're going to start to experience that. And we're going to start to create space within the body to create more light and to allow then more love to come through. And then I'm actually like tap into the frequency of love. Or if there's something, the heart is not open, okay, we'll look at what's there. What needs to be forgiven about maybe what your father did to you or what was happened before, right? Or maybe there's a generational pattern which needs to be cleared, which if that was cleared, then who Trump becomes is an entirely different animal, right? Or a different human being. So I think these labels are dangerous because they're such a limiter on who people can be. And, my own experience is like, okay, well, we're vibration. So is there a vibration called narcissist? Well, based on agreement in the world, yeah, there is. But if you look underneath all of that, would you find narcissist in the cells? I don't think you would. So if that's the case, why is that label going to be helpful as a listening of who this person can be? And if what we truly want from our leaders is to be the most effective political leaders they can be, why listen from that small space, right? Why not listen for who they could be if we create the opportunity for them to be that?
Oh, 100%. And this has been one of the most powerful things on my personal journey is starting to think of people like that, right? The more we study trauma, we learn about the effects, and the more we can see everybody as sort of a result of what happened to them as children, maybe even what's happened to them generationally, as you see, and have such more empathy for people and go, well, I don't hate anybody. I can kind of see, or I can appreciate how certain things might have happened that created this person to be acting in the way that they're acting. And on the other side of that is the fact that you've got real people in power having a real impact on other people's lives. And so we can be empathetic to how they create, what circumstances created this actor. But then there's the practical reality of how the actions are impacting people. And so, how we label them or not, I love your example. And I question, does somebody who's in the space that Trump is in, is he ever going to allow anyone like you to work with him, right? There have been many, many, many people in leadership, really high level leaders who have tried to work with and around Trump and have quit in frustration and have publicly come out and said, there's nobody can deal with this guy.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. And I really love it. I think the first thing you're looking for is you want to be the bridge. You don't want to be the person who's trying to change them, right? No one wants to be changed. Political leaders, anyone, no one wants to be changed. That creates a defensiveness. Same with political systems. If you try and change a system, the system rebels. It reacts like a human being. So the mistake is to try and change systems. It's just like mistakes to try and change people. What you want to look is, what do they want? What's important to them? Okay, let me help you achieve that, right? And in the process of achieving that, they're going to shift from within. I don't have to change them. They just shift the beliefs they held, the views, they disappear. They become absurd, right? And I've seen it time and time again where people are like, oh, I didn't like myself that much. And now like the love is just flowing through because literally it is a channel. Like one of the things I do is I call it a frequency of love. So when more space and light opens up in the body, I say, all right, I want you to think of what creates a feeling of love. I want you to filter that into wherever that is in the body. And I'm going to bring through this frequency sound, which is going to expand the level of light and love that you're experiencing, right? Sometimes it's love for, your children. Sometimes it's love for that version of self, which is dealing with this particular tension or what that tension's around, whatever it is. But the more space you create, the more someone shifts. And sometimes I've seen people, what is it like? 40 years of trauma is kind of compressed into an hour and it's, okay, that's no longer there, right? It's like, that's how quick it can be for people who are, it helps if they're open. But that's how quick it can be. Like you can really move through lifetimes of trauma, memories, experiences in a very, very fast amount of time just by having them experience what's there, having the shift in the resonant frequency which is needed to create harmony within the cells, for them then to tap into, what my friend, some neuroscientist calls a unified conscious field. And then from there, you start to shift into this different human being before your eyes and before my eyes.
So if anyone out there knows how we can get Sam on the phone with Donald Trump, please, what? Let's make it happen. Let's see what we can shift. That would be fantastic. Democracy is at stake. No, I'm just so many of them. Actually, can we talk about this since we're getting ourselves in trouble? Since I'm getting myself.
Yeah, I love getting in trouble.
So many of my friends that are in the woo-woo space, the personal growth and development space, are fans of Trump. Are a right wing, or what I would consider right wing person. I'm obviously a general liberal, like a moderate kind of liberal person. And that was so interesting to me at the beginning. I really had to challenge myself to start to open up my own bubble to lots of different perspectives. NLP was super helpful with that for me, like respecting everybody's worldview, becoming empathetic for how everybody got to where they are, realizing that I got to where I am through my own traumas and experiences and everything else, and that we're all having unique. So all that got to that point where I could have lots of different friends. Because I didn't before. I didn't have lots of different friends 10 years ago. I had one kind of friends. Now I have lots of different friends. Cool. This phenomenon of the woo-woo to alt-right pipeline is fascinating to me. And I'm curious what your take on it, because we start seeing people get into like, okay, anti-vaxxing, and now, and it's kind of crypto's coming into it somehow. Now, I don't know. There's just weird intersections and people are like, yay, Trump. And I'm like, how did we get from unified consciousness to Donald Trump, and like, why is this a thing? What do you think?
Yeah, it's interesting. I guess it's what people are seeing, right? It's the perspective from which they're looking and creating their perception of what is the truth or reality, which is then giving them the frame from which they see, well, this is the way which is more consistent with what I believe, right? Whatever that be, whether it's about anti-vaxxation, whether it's about cryptocurrency and blockchain, or whether it's about, Donald Trump being the future that we need to create, America be a great country again. All right. So that's what I would suggest. It's what are they seeing, which is creating the perspective. And then if you are able to understand that, then we can look at, okay, well, what is it that you want to see? What is it you want to see created? And then is this actually the pathway, right? Without a judgment of they're right, you're wrong. Because as soon as you come from that, it becomes combative, which is a massive problem within something like the US, but so many countries where it's divisive. Like, if you vote for this person instead of that person, you can't be friends with you. You can't be family anymore, right? It's like, no. It's like, can we get we're just human beings, right? Can we just get that the illusion of separation is just that? And like, even if you experience sometimes not being understood, not being accepted, not belonging, right? At core level, there is no separation between you and I, right? It's just there is these things in the way which have created the perception that, oh, I can't trust you. Oh, this person isn't worthy of my time. Oh, this person, doesn't understand me, or whatever it happens to be. Or I cannot be friends with that person because they've got those fucking views and I can't stand that, right? We just, the more we can get, like, the core of who we are is love. Love and peace. Like, it sounds, cliche, but it's literally that. Like, I see it every day with the work that I do. So it's kind of like, it's got to be that. Like, it's as simple as that. And we overcomplicate it and then think, well, these people, they don't understand love. These people don't understand us, rather than what do we need to let go of to be able to listen to what's actually going on for them, to listen to what their concerns are. What do they need to experience if we disagree with their point of view to be able to potentially have them see a different perspective, right? As soon as we come from, I'm right, you're wrong, you've shut down any chance of a conversation which is viable.
Well, absolutely. And we learn this, in negotiation, right? The first thing we want to get to is, what do you want? What do I want? And if it's separate, let's go up a level conceptually until we get to the same thing, whether it's, but we all want to feel at peace, something super high level. Okay, now we're just disagreeing on how do we get there, but we're actually agreeing on here. And if we can find that point of agreement in the beginning of a negotiation, the negotiation goes much smoother because it feels like, hey, we're already in agreement. We're just working out the details now of the agreement. Now, what's complicated with political communication is we end up doing the opposite of that because the other side has to be bad in order to mobilize this side, or at least that's the conventional wisdom, is we need something to fight against, a villain, a concept, of good versus evil, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's just old-fashioned, ideas which are still prolific, essentially, in not just politics, but society in general. Right, the binaries are so binary still for so many people that they cannot see at this stage from another perspective. So of course it's going to be that, or of course it's going to be this perspective, and there's no kind of gray area between the two, or flexibility of boundaries as they move through time and based on different kind of societal constructs, agreements, mores, etc. Right. So the more we can be sensitive to all of that, the more we're going to have a dynamic flow of agreement, but also a dynamic flow of, oh, is this perspective that I used to hold, or I think I hold, still the perspective that I hold, right? And being open to seeing the way things can move in the same way that, oh, I believed that it was really hard to make money. Now I see that it's easy, right? It can be as literally like polar as that. And I see that again all the time, where people shift their money vibration. Like one person who wanted to create like a $4.5 million vision in the session. And they came in and the view was money is poverty. The subconscious belief was money is poverty. About an hour in was money is wealth. And from that space, we then were able to expand the vision, and it became like $100 million vision over the next 4 years rather than 4.5 over 2 years, because what was a previous way of seeing and experiencing themselves had shifted. And from that space of shifting, something else emerges. So I don't think it's any different when it comes to these other kinds of beliefs where there's a contestation about how someone sees it, right? Like the right to bear arms would be an example of that. Well, what's going on there? Okay, they want to protect their family, often is kind of going to be, I want to protect themselves. Okay, I get that. Like those are valid concerns in a world where there's a lot of guns, right? And what if you didn't have that fear anymore that you were potentially going to get shot? What kind of action would you be taking? Would you need to potentially have an AK-47 or whatever kinds of assault rifles in your, weaponry to be able to feel safe at night, or to be able to go out in the streets, or to have your kids go to school, or whatever it is? Like recognizing that the concerns are valid for them is the place you start. No, rather than, no, you don't need the right to bear arms. Like this is just old school, Second Amendment stuff. The founding fathers had a different kind of historical context, and so that's not what they meant it for. Blah blah blah. It's like, yeah, you can be right as all day long about the historical nature of the thing, but what is that person's experience? Because that's all that's going to matter for them is their experience and the experience of those they love, and all they're trying to do is look at the people they love. I heard something yesterday where it was like, people don't fight for their country; they fight for the person next to them. Right. And I feel like that kind of applies as well to these other kinds of battles that people are fighting in life. Where it's like, they're not fighting against you. They're fighting for something they really care about and love, which is their family or their friends or something else. That's what the cause is really for. Or they're fighting for their religion, or what their faith, or anything. So it's not personal. Even though they make it personal, often it's not actually personal.
It's, do you want to be right, or do you want to feel what you want to feel? Do you want to shift into what you want to shift in? And all the peace comes in the middle, and all the peace comes from being okay no matter what happens, which takes some some work to get there, but I'm okay if this happens, I'm okay if that happens. That's where we get into the Buddha like quality of what is will be, and what is, and that and I'm just part of what is. And but when you start to feel that, that's when you start to feel yourself shift as, I don't need to be part of the fight necessarily.
Yeah.
It's actually going to be more helpful as if I'm an example of peace.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I completely agree. I don't have anything more to add on that particular point.
Well, maybe that's a good place to wrap up. That Sam, thank you so much for being with us. Where can people find you? You obviously do amazing work. If they want to work with you or talk to you, where can they seek you out?
Yeah, so my company is Soul Purpose Leaders. So you can find me on soulpurposeleaders.com. You can also find me on social media. I'm on Facebook, on Instagram, under Sam Kukathas. I think on LinkedIn, we're under Soul Purpose Leaders. So those are the easy things. I think, like your previous guest, Sam Kukathas, there are no other Sam Kukathases in the world. So if you Google me or stalk me, you can easily find me. One of the beauties of having an unusual surname.
Please stalk Sam and find please, if you can get Sam on the phone with Donald Trump, please get in touch with us and let's now that maybe this is my whole purpose in the world is to make this connection happen. I will gladly do my part. If that's the path the universe has laid out for me to play.
Well, I've just been at Manifest University, and so we're in the manifesting realm. So who knows?
Bring it. If it be in everybody's highest and best interest, then let's make it. So, Sam, thank you so much for being on.
Thank you so much, Michelle. It's been an absolute joy and pleasure.